good afternoon, or good evening, good morning, really, wherever you're joining us from. My name is George Wright. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the head of social media here at IG Work. If you've not heard of us before, perfectly fine. We're the LGBTQ plus business community. We're a platform for professionals, graduates, inclusive employers, really anyone that believes in workplace equality, to connect with one another, build networks, access mentors in mental health support, such as and as a number of inclusive events such as today, workshops, trainings, and obviously working with our inclusive partners to advertise 80 to 90,000, I believe it is now. No, I lie, probably 100. At last count, 90,000, probably 100,000 by now, jobs around the world with 300 inclusive partners. Agreements for USC, love it. Yes, so we've got a fantastic panel coming up for you today. This is one of the many events that we run throughout our calendar year. You can join us next week when we're talking about Ida Hobbit, for example, but I am conscious not to eat into more of our panelists' time. They're the people you've come to hear from. So I guess I'm going to take it away and ask them to introduce themselves. Klaus, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Happy to. My name is Klaus Goodwin. I'm working for Organon Pharmaceuticals, which is kind of a US, New Jersey-based pharmaceutical company. My role there is Executive Director, R&D, Quality and Compliance. So I'm supporting the preclinical and clinical space at Organon from kind of a quality risk management perspective. Very excited being here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you, Klaus. Santia, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Santia Constance. My pronouns are she, they. I work for GSK as a quality data analyst in Hertfordshire in the UK. I am also on the UK leadership team for our LGBTQ plus employee network as the health and wellbeing lead.
Thank you so much. Kate, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My name is Katarzyna Adamczyk, but everybody in the UK calls me Kate, and I'm a psychotherapist in private practice, and I also am completing doctorate in counseling psychology, and currently I'm seeing my private clients, and as well I work for LGBT Health and Wellbeing in Glasgow.
Superb. Lovely to meet you. Adam, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, absolutely. Hi. I'm Adam. I work at Financial Times. I'm the Global Operations Manager for the Customer Care Department there, and I'm involved in the both the Proud FT network, the LGBTQ plus network, and also the Mental Health Network. So really great opportunity to speak today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Adam. Prashita, would you like to say hello to our audience?
Hi, I'm Prashita Maheshwari Applin, and my pronouns are they, them. I am the digital mobilization lead at Stonewall and also politics editor at Bricks magazine. So I work in digital campaigns when it comes to queer and human rights, and also I'm a political journalist and a freelance journalist and writer. And I'm also based in London.
Superb. And finally, last but not least, Nai, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's Nai. My pronouns are they, he. I'm a lead cybersecurity engineer at Immersive Labs, content developer. So we create immersive experiences for our users to learn about cybersecurity. So I'm one of the offensive security team with a background in penetration testing and red teaming. And yeah, I'm happy to be here today, as everyone else has said.
Thank you so much. Let's hop into this then. Do you mind, Nai, if I stay with you for our first question and to kick us off, and maybe a bit of a background perhaps, but what do you feel, I guess, are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have around mental health?
Ooh, so it is quite a hard one, because I think a lot of people's, I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that it doesn't affect you. Like most people struggle. I would say 99% of the population have struggled with their mental health at some point in their life. So the idea that someone might be doing something for attention or doing something because they just want a reaction from someone isn't like the greatest thing to assume. So when we approach conversations with an idea of, oh, that person might be faking or whatever, it kind of already brings the conversation to the wrong light. So the biggest misconception in my mind is that it doesn't, like, you have to be disadvantaged to suffer, because it isn't the case. It can affect anyone at any point in their life.
Excellent. Thank you. I guess I'll open this up to the rest of our panel. I don't know, Kate, if maybe, from your perspective, if you had any thoughts on these misconceptions.
I would say from my experience, the main misconception is that if I have mental health problems, that means that there's something wrong with me. Like as Nai said, that there's a massive impact of the context, and according to the statistics, 1 in 4 people in the UK will suffer significant mental health problems throughout their life, like in their life. So it is, it's more common than not to struggle with your mental health. But what we tend to do, we tend to blame ourselves and become very critical, and we take it as there's something wrong with me, I'm weak, I'm not good enough. And that kind of stigmatization is actually stopping us from seeking help and reaching out. So for me, I would say that will be the main kind of misconception. And as well, majority of my clients, they reach out to me, during their crisis or breaking point where they cannot continue on their own anymore. And the help is there to be accessed a little bit earlier, before it gets to that point. So from my perspective, it's more about that we underestimate the impact of the context, which was actually, I think that was the main gains of the pandemic, the good that happened because of the pandemic, that we started to speak about our mental health and how it is impacted by the context. So for me, that was one of the really kind of good things that came out of a very, I would say, traumatic experience.
Fantastic. Thank you. Really much appreciated. Did anyone else have any thoughts they wanted to add on that?
I just wanted to chime in with one option, sorry, just really quickly. So I think for me, one of the biggest misconceptions that I had early on is that other people's experiences invalidated my own. So I have quite close family and friends who do suffer from depression, and initially when I was trying to figure out what was going on for me and my own kind of experiences with that, I thought, well, I've seen them very, very really struggle, and they had it worse, and somehow it made me feel like what I was going through was valid. It wasn't good enough, or wasn't I wasn't struggling enough to then seek that support. So I think it's really important to understand that everyone experiences are different, and that if you are struggling, reach out and do seek that help, no matter who around you is also struggling with their own issues.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry, Klaus, did you want to add something?
Well, it's not really a lot of additional information, but I think one of the misconceptions in my mind is also really that it's kind of categorized and put into a box as weakness often, which I think, just being someone who struggles with mental health issues, I think it's actually not, because I think mental health problems really generate a lot of strength, actually, if you go through them properly and really seek help and create your networks of support. So I think that's probably also one of the misconceptions I often see.
Yeah, I would just add to that a little bit, is also that along with it being put into categories around weakness and stuff, I think mental health and mental ill health is often put into a box and category away from physical health. And I think it's kind of a misconception that like your physical body health is not linked to your mental health. It's all linked, and the kind of one can manifest in other parts of your body. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that we can have like an overview of our well-being that includes both physical and mental health in order to better understand ourselves.
Thank you very much, Rosita. Adam, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add. I appreciate we've had a lot of there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think when I was thinking about misconceptions, I think one of the things is that misconception is that if someone is struggling with mental health, it will be sort of externally manifested, like you will be able to see that, and I think that's not always the case. And I think it's really important, and certainly from my own experience and my experience of connecting and sharing with either my work community or wider community is recognizing that it isn't always obvious, and actually people like myself and probably a lot of us on the panel have built up coping mechanisms throughout our lives that have meant that we can externally seem like we're functioning really well, but that doesn't actually factor in for the unique experience that each of us is going through and the sort of neurodiversity that exists across the community. So I think that's really important, and it is still, I would say, a common misconception about mental health or mental health issues that people might be experiencing.
Excellent, thank you. It's almost like you've, I guess, read my mind, Adam, because that's actually something I was interested in asking about. I think to stay, with the topic of coping methods, are there any particular sort of coping methods that you use or you feel that sort of work quite well for you?
Yeah, so I think one of the important things with coping mechanisms that I've found is to try different ones, but also to not. I think if you are struggling with your own mental health, and for myself that can manifest as like anxiety, but it can also be depression and low mood, and I've gone through different periods of my life, and when I feel like I've been in that place, sometimes hearing about coping mechanisms and maybe even hearing about success stories of other people having successes with different, tools, different things like that. When you're in that place, you can actually use that to sort of metaphorically beat yourself over the head with it. So I think it's really important to try different things, but also to not use it as negative energy for yourself if that doesn't work for you. So for me, there's definitely been things like around meditation, around journaling, and physical exercise. As we talked about, physical and mental health are so connected, that those things have been really useful for me, and I now have certain habits that I factor into my daily routine that are really important to me. But that doesn't mean that they always work, and it doesn't mean that I get them right every day. And I think that's really important when talking about tools to use. It should be those tools are unique to each of us, and that we should also feel like we can try something and then move on to the next thing if it doesn't work for us once we're given that a chance to see if it actually helps with our unique issues of the mental health we might hope to see.
Excellent, thank you. I appreciate that, and I know I do appreciate. I know it's quite a deeply personal thing to ask, but I don't know if anyone else on the panel wanted to share sort of any particular coping mechanisms that they've relied on or found useful.
Yeah, just building on what Adam said, I think the idea of trying different things is super important, because everyone's experiences are different and everyone will align with different methods. And I think one of the as well more important things that you can do is to forgive yourself when certain methods don't work for you. So one of the big things that my coping methods change all the time. I have ADHD, so my interests fluctuate left, right, and center. So I can't really fixate on one coping mechanism. But one of the big things that I've accepted is that that's fine. It's fine to feel that one day I can play video games for 2 hours and feel great. The next day I need to go and take a walk outside. So my coping mechanisms change, but part of the process and sort of the journey that I'm going through with my mental health is accepting that it's fine to need that change and to need that variety, because all people's life experiences are different.
Yeah, I also have ADHD, and I really do relate that to that experience of having to accept that actually the way that I function and get solace and find my way through life doesn't have to fit a mold, that the way that I do it is okay, and if it's helping me, and kind of jumping on what you were saying, adding to what you were saying around finding different mechanisms from different way day to day. I think one of the things that helps me quite a lot as I use as sort of to balance and maintain my mental health is putting time and energy into creative outputs that aren't necessarily commodified, or that I don't feel pressure to be incredibly perfect at or to be making money from, because obviously sometimes we can get stuck in this capitalist idea that everything that we do has to be put out there and a way to earn an income. And I think actually kind of a good nice thing to come out of the ADHD is that I do lots of creative things and have lots of hobbies that I can engage with on different days and don't feel that external pressure to do. And I think that really helps with with just regulating my own mental health.
Excellent. Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I guess building on this topic, it's one thing to have personal, I guess, coping mechanisms, but to look, I guess, more broadly, obviously workplaces, particularly now that we're starting to get back into our offices more often, perhaps, or moving to sort of different approaches of working. I just wondered what our panel felt about the role that workplaces have in supporting their staff and how workplaces, I guess, can be more supportive. Klaus, do you mind if I come to you on that question to start off with?
Yeah, of course. I think workplace, knowing that it really takes so much time of our lives to be there, I think is probably one of the most important spaces for addressing the topic of mental health in my mind. And I think obviously as a corporation, companies play a huge role, but I think also for me, it's important that people managers are really adequately trained how to really I shouldn't say deal with mental health, but really manage people who potentially really have mental health issues. And so it's about creating safe spaces for me. And I can probably share a little bit about my experience in that context, because I was pretty heavily hit by COVID last year. And for whatever reason, I really fell into an episode of anxiety at the time. And it was really difficult for me to open up to my management at the time and just asking for time out. But after I did it and took my time out and came back to work after that, and I was really a people manager of a team of 20 at the time, I was really quite impressed about how people reacted to the fact that I really took time for myself. I also tried to make sure that in my team meetings, I really had really dedicated time where people were encouraged to share. And I think that's the context. I think corporations play a huge role. So kind of educating your people managers, creating safe spaces.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate you hearing that, Klaus. Kate, I don't know if it comes up much, sort of, I said, when you're working with patients and clients. I don't know if you had any thoughts, perhaps, on ways that workplaces can be more supportive of their staff.
Yeah, sure. I think, as psychologists, we're a particular group and we share kind of particular schemas about our mental health. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we were the heroes. We needed to rescue the country. So we went into, we threw ourselves at work, forgetting about our own limitations, but as well, we kind of, follow a very false narrative that we as psychologists, we should deal with stress and anxiety better because we know so much about stress and anxiety. And that taught us a big lesson. We were taught a big lesson quite early because our burnout rates went really high. And we started to take care of ourselves. So we very much started to implement the compassionate leadership kind of narrative within our teams. We started to take care of ourselves within, small groups, but as well, during the staff meetings, we were having on my team, I started the gratitude kind of exercise where we were just sharing with each other what we're grateful for. Me, what I was grateful for about my job as well when it comes to my other team members that I would be grateful to. For example, let's say Alan and Peter for specific things. So it became a very important thing. And as well, managing boundaries. I mean, with the right now, the model, the kind of the hybrid model of working or, or working just from home, suddenly the boundaries are very not clear about our personal and professional life. So it was very kind of important within our team to establish boundaries. And we used strategies. One of the popular strategies was a commute strategy. So we pretended that we were actually commuting to work or back from work. So we had that time to close, to kind of get a closure. So we, for example, after I was finishing practice, my clinic, and I was working from home for NHS, I would go for a walk for 45 minutes around the block just to make sure that I'm kind of putting almost the files away. So that was a very important thing, or, straight away taking a shower. And just that was the time when I would start to basically just focus on my personal stuff and put the professional stuff away. But just, I would say that generally speaking, as well, about my clients, they still, I would say most of us have a fear of disclosure. So we are afraid to go to our boss, supervisor, manager and say, listen, I'm struggling with this and this. We do have that, and that I think should be rewarded by the managers, that we've got that level of openness and courage to come and say, I'm struggling and I need help, I need some time off, or I'm on medication, I'm in therapy. And I think that should be implemented from the very start. When you kind of like go into work, you get as part of your induction, like we have health and safety induction, and then you kind of, position. It should be as well, health and safety. It should include mental health, what the company, how the organization is taking care of you and your mental health. And that, it is safe for you to come and say, and actually it is desirable for you to come and say that when you're struggling, because the burnout, presentism is taking away people's productivity and creativity. And the minute you start to actually, pay more attention to mental health, the minute you start to speak about vulnerability, this actually, the productivity and creativity of the team just rises up drastically. So there is a lot to lose and plenty to gain by, shedding more light on the mental health, taking care of the mental health within on the organizational level.
Thank you so much for that insight, Kate. I appreciate it. I think you raise a very important point there about, I think, to go back to what we were saying about, rewarding that vulnerability, about rewarding that ability to come forward and say, look, I'd like to, for example, take time off for my mental health. I was wondering, and I think, Sanchia, I hope you don't mind if I come to you to ask, or to kick off this question. I wondered if you had any thoughts on what the importance of being able to be that vulnerable is, of being able to actually, I guess, take that step and feel like you can speak openly about it.
Absolutely. And I've kind of got two sort of like views of looking at this, really. So from a personal perspective, being vulnerable, it helps you to work through your own kind of issues. I know personally, I find that quite often I don't realize how I'm feeling until I've verbalized it. And then I kind of sit there and go, oh, I didn't realize that. And then it just helps me work through my own emotions, my own kind of thought processes. It's also a really big sign of courage, I think, to be publicly vulnerable in, in a forum like this, or in a workplace, is so brave. For I think we're all really brave for doing this, and with that bravery comes resilience and a chance for us to really embrace who we are. And I also think from the other side of it is that when we are more vulnerable, when we are showing to be vulnerable, when we are open about it, it shows that we're a safe space for other people to be vulnerable too. It's showing that actually, hey, I've got this experience, I'm going through these troubles, but I'm here for you if you are also going through similar experiences. It definitely drives the foundation for open and honest conversations, and helps people to not feel quite so lonely. I think we've been running a campaign at work at the moment with the hashtag unique but not alone, which I think is amazing, and just kind of shows that actually, yeah, we are all very unique people, but we're never alone in our experiences, and that, all we have to do is just open up a bit to then receive a lot more help.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Sanchia. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And you are, I think, absolutely right. And I do want to say a massive thank you to everyone on this panel. I said this before, this started, but it is, on such a topic where there feels like there is still a lot of stigma and people can't come forward about it. It's, really, really, kudos to all of you. Klaus, I wonder if you had any thoughts at all on sort of the, this being able to be visible in the workplace and vulnerable.
I mean, I think it's definitely not very different to what Sanja said. I think for me, being vulnerable just really is an act of courage. I mean, that's really the first thing. And my experience with it is simply that it really creates a lot of connection often, which you personally don't anticipate initially when you start being vulnerable. But it's, I think, really a natural reaction that people suddenly start to connect, which is, I think, so important for us who are dealing with mental health issues, because often you're in your bubble and you think there's nothing outside of that bubble. And suddenly when you show yourself and be your true self, actually the world opens up again, and it really generates a network of support. And again, similar to what Sanja also said, it's from the other side, it really allows people to come in and really also show themselves in whatever state they are. So I think it's really a two-way street, but really for me, the kind of general theme of vulnerability is really actually connection.
Absolutely. Thank you. I don't know if anyone else on the panel had any thoughts about what being visible, I guess, on this and being vulnerable means to them at all. Obviously. Adam, go ahead.
I was just going to, again, echo what's already been said. I think a lot, it really resonated with me, particularly the piece around the vulnerability, because I know, certainly thinking about the journey that I've been on with my own mental health, a big part of that has been sharing that and feeling that fear and that of being vulnerable, and worrying that if you show vulnerability, that's showing weakness, and actually that could be almost used against you, or that you might not be considered for opportunities if that was their management, or you might not be respected if that's for people who are within your team that you're responsible for. But I think almost taking that leap and just jumping past those fears has been both like a really empowering experience, but also has, Klaus, as you said, it's definitely created that sense of connection. And I've experienced that both with my own line manager, who I share really openly with in terms of mental health struggles, successes, that sort of thing, but also with my team members. And I know that that's created a space where I can feel more able to share, but also it feels like over that time that's allowed more open conversations to be brought to me around other people's individual experiences. So I definitely think that's important. In terms of workplaces, I was also thinking about there needs to be, I think, the time to do that, and I found that was particularly important when we are working remotely, because often the time that I would spend in a one-to-one situation with my team members or with my line manager, there would be so much to get through in terms of actual work discussions and agenda points that we want to cover. It's making sure that we also have that opportunity to say, actually, let's clear the agenda today because I need to talk about where I'm at, because I'm really having a really bad day with my anxiety and I need to just figure this out and talk this through with someone. And I know that I've been afforded that ability to do that, and I've been able to do that with my team, and it has definitely, from a personal aspect, it's helped, and I know from speaking with team members that that's helped to have that space and that time. So I think that's important from a workplace point of view.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Adam. I guess then to move. Oh, and sorry, Mark was that's what somebody says. Yeah. So I guess then to move on slightly more, I think I said we've looked at, I guess, self-help. We've looked at the role workplaces have. I want to take a moment quickly to look at allyship. Obviously, it said, between coping mechanisms, how workplaces can be more supportive. Are there any ways that you think perhaps that we can be more supportive as individuals of other people when they're sort of perhaps suffering from mental ill health? I don't know if anyone wanted to hop on and take that one. Sanja, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off. So I think one of the things that I do from a personal experience, well, some of the things that I do is when I'm really struggling with low mood or depression is that I withdraw. I tend to stop talking to my friends quite so often. I stop being like the chatty kind of happy, like chatty one in the group. And I think from an ally perspective, it's recognizing those signs in your friends. If you see those kinds of changes, reach out to them, and just because not all, like, there isn't always going to be a case where the person who is struggling is going to say, hey, I'm struggling, come help me. You know, sometimes they need that kind of nudge to say, actually, are you okay? And just kind of on that as well, like, I heard a really powerful thing today was there's a big difference between saying, how are you doing, and are you okay? And I think recognizing the difference between those two conversations is, and also the way that you say it, just really helps drive some of that conversation, like being open and honest. From one of the other things I was thinking about is not taking things personally. I know, kind of just off the back of what I mentioned about withdrawing from my friends, is that sometimes my friends have gone, oh, well, you didn't talk to me for 3 months, so I'm, you know, I don't want to hang out with you or whatever. And it's like, actually, well, that's not a reflection on you as a person. It's something that I was struggling with. So it's like not taking things personally, and being a bit understanding and nice about things, if that makes sense. Yeah, when that person who is struggling is trying to, you know, reintegrate with friends and family.
I do think there's like we've been talking about like coping mechanisms and like individual processes with all this, but I think that actually a lot of the conversation with mental health often does focus on the kind of individual responsibility on the person that is struggling. And like, while I completely think that we all have a responsibility to communicate where we're at with the people that are in our lives and our loved ones, I also think that the kind of like community care and like wider mutual care and things are really, really important parts of being human and parts of how we look after each other. So I think especially when reaching out doesn't always necessarily mean that people actually get the support they need from systems and from services. Like, there is an equal access, there is a lack of access for mental health services, and there's unequal access to mental health services. I think there's a lot that we can do to support one another within communities and within friendship groups. So there's a lot of like, this was another thing that kind of came out of COVID, but it's been something that's been present in communities who were marginalized for much longer than that. But like, there are mutual aid networks and groups where people can stay in touch with one another and also provide like concrete support when they're struggling so much that they can't go to like a food shop or like cook for themselves and things. I feel like those are possible, that it's possible to access that support through communities and through getting involved at like grassroots mutual aid levels, as well as within friendship groups and circles like that. So I think there's like things that people can do in terms of being an ally to support their friends and stuff, but I think it also can go beyond that, into communities and into networks and things. And I definitely think that's available now and has always been, but it's like more on the surface now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Now, I wondered, sort of between both, I guess, individual and then looking at community support as well, I wonder if you had any sort of thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, I think my political leanings are quite left. So my understanding is that a lot of our societal issues don't really help with our mental health. So it is very hard to sort of create concrete steps towards improving the lives of us as a majority before we can before we sort of have a better equal standing ground. So the best, in my opinion, thing we can start doing is have these conversations and ensure that people are talking about them. Because if we're not the ones talking about them, who is going to be the ones talking about? And to even start making progress, we need to make sure that the people that are most disadvantaged are getting the support they need to improve their mental health. Because it's all well and good as saying, amazing, we're improving the lives of our mental health, but if the most disadvantaged people in society are obviously disproportionately affected by suicide and negative mental health, if those people are still negatively impacted, I don't give a hoot if I'm feeling better, because to me someone else is still struggling. So that's my big thing, is that conversations need to be open so we can improve for others as well as for ourselves.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Kate, perhaps maybe from your perspective and sort of from your work, I wondered if maybe you'd like to add anything to that at all.
Well, kind of. I'm still thinking about what Nay said about the mental health of the discriminated groups and the equity that we need when it comes to that. It's not so much about equality, but more about equity. So we need to give more to these people, because otherwise we need to give people equal chances to succeed in life. And when it comes to mental health in that group, there is such impact of context on that. So the systemic discrimination, prejudice, stigma. So mental health of underprivileged groups can be easily improved by helping them to change their life circumstances. So, when it comes to, I think the Maslow's pyramid of needs would explain that really well. So these people need to feel safe and secure. They need to have a roof over their head, work with some kind of a purpose, making a difference to somebody else's life. Access to health services and good education. So once we sort that out, it's they have very good environment to improve their mental health. But generally speaking, we can be kinder to ourselves on a very kind of basic level. So we can be smiling towards each other and be helpful. Small things like holding doors, or when I'm passing by a homeless person, I don't have any money, I at least acknowledge them and say it's like hello, and smile at them. Anything. Or asking them whether there's anything I can buy for them. So, small things, small acts of kindness that any one of us can do mean so much. And again, there's something about connection, and there's something about, mental health. As Sancha said, when we struggle with mental health, we tend to isolate and withdraw, and we usually feel shame, and we believe that others will reject us. So to counteract this, we need to make connections. We need to reach out, and simple question: how are you doing today? Yeah. So that's my input. I don't know if that was particularly helpful.
No, absolutely. No, I appreciate it. Appreciate it greatly, and I am just grateful to all of you for sort of for different perspectives on this. And Klaus, maybe if I could come to you next, sort of on this topic. I wonder what your thoughts on this, as a means of supporting people in this way, sort of whether or not do you feel if there are sort of any other ways we can help people?
I think a lot of things have already been said. So, but just putting it into my words. I think from a community perspective, I think education is really important, so that people really understand the signals of when somebody might struggle, and then obviously also creating kind of mechanisms to actually support. The other thing I would say is really, and also it's kind of a repetition, I think it's really access. meaning especially being in the US and knowing how our health system works here. I think if you don't have good health coverage, you're basically screwed. And so I think working within the system to allow really marginalized groups and underrepresented groups access to medical health is an important topic. And I don't believe any society independently aware has really found a solution for this. So I think, Kate, I really very much sympathize with what you said with doing small things, even if it's just acknowledging somebody who struggles. I think sometimes that creates a light in a person and really supports. But I think as a society, we still have really long ways to go.
I just wanted to say a very quick thing, kind of like building on what others have said since I last talked. I won't take long. Just to say, like, I think, yeah, I really love what you've said, Kate and Klaus and I, about like kindness and about equitable access to services. But I think along with kindness, I think one thing that we can also do is sort of acknowledge the other full spectrum of emotions and that it's like valid to feel those. So yeah, kindness is important towards one another, but actually there's a lot of power and hope in things like anger if you're from marginalized and discriminated against communities. Like, we're all queer here, but we all probably find a lot of solace through community. But in order to actually feel like your all hope for a better future is not being totally crushed down by the fact that within certain contexts, people from more discriminated against backgrounds and communities don't have that same access and don't have the same resources to help with their mental health. I think, yeah, actually, like, being able to come together and validate anger and find hope and movement towards a better future through that is actually holds a lot of power in helping our mental health as well.
Fully agree. Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. And Adam, I appreciate it. So we've had a lot of information been thrown around, so perhaps a tough one to sort of close up this question, but I don't know if there's anything left you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think one of the really important things, like it's definitely already been said, is almost looking at your own community in the sense of the people you have a connection with, because I think we can often look at mental health as a problem to be solved, and actually starting with just like it's a big problem. It's a problem, much bigger than any of us, and it's not something that can really be solved as such. I think it's more like looking at your own community, the connections you have with your friends and your groups. I think Sancha, you had mentioned about sometimes withdrawing, and I reflect on my own experience of I'm so grateful to the people that have persisted with me, and I include my partner, some of my close friends who, when I have been having some of my biggest struggles or my sort of darker days, if you like, sometimes it does take someone to persist to break through that, because I do want to withdraw, and I can't, in those moments, I don't want, there is probably a feeling of shame, a feeling of almost independence of, well, I want to deal with this myself. And I think I've been so grateful over, my life really for those friends and those relationships that I have where people have persisted with me and reached out, and maybe reached out a couple of times, or, pushed past those barriers that I've put up. And I think for me, what's important is recognizing how grateful I am for that support and trying to, as much as possible, almost pay that forward. So looking at, okay, who is it within my life, within my work community, within my family, or within my friendship group, that I can recognize that that person is maybe withdrawing, that person seems to be that they're not really wanting to speak too much or wanting to connect, want to do things. Is that because they're wanting to pull away, or is that because they're struggling, they're going through a tough time? And actually, can I be that persistent friend? Can I push past some of those barriers and actually step in to help them? And it is that feeling of, it's a weird, when you're in that moment, you're pushing away, but you actually want someone to come through those barriers and sort of come and meet you in that dark place. So I think that's really important in terms of what we can do as individuals, is look out for those signs of someone pulling away and actually persist and be a bit more resilient to overcoming those barriers to get through to someone, if that is someone that's within your community or your circle of friends, relationships.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate that. And I think it's a nice sort of way to wrap up that question. I see in the chat we've had a question asked. I will use this point quite nice to say. It said, if you do have any questions you want to ask us, feel free to pop them in the chat, pop them in the Q&A box. If they're in the Q&A box, it's a bit easier for us because we can keep track of them, so there's no risk of getting caught up in the chat. And somebody has already added one. My God, you were quick. But yes, fantastic. We'll come around to those at the end when we've got some time. I guess then my next question, one I think to sort of look particularly more into minority communities. I want to take a particular look at the importance of gender identity and gender diverse people. Least of all, I think, as I need not hopefully explain to anyone at the moment that our gender diverse community, our trans non-binary community are taking quite a bit of a hammering at the moment, and the impact that this sort of has on people's mental health is something of interest to me. I know, Nai, you'd mentioned sort of the role that gender identity has sort of played with your mental health. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind elaborating a little bit more on that, if you're capable.
Yeah, it sucks. If I'm being quite honest, I think you hit the nail on the head at the moment when you're saying that the trans community, and I do consider myself trans as a non-binary person, we are taking a hammering at the moment. If you see, the news is always sort of focused towards, it's very negative towards trans people. It's incredibly biased against trans people. We've seen all the stuff in America at the moment where a lot of trans rights are being eroded. Even in the UK, we're not as positive as we could be when it comes to trans and gender identity rights. I think the UK is actually listed in one of the top 5 worst countries in the world for sort of gender equality, so which is really fun for us. So yeah, no, I will be quite frank, and I'll say that the conversations we have in at the moment in society are quite negative, and they do have an impact. And especially, I used to be a teacher, so I saw firsthand the kind of impact this had on adolescent kids. Kids who are exploring their gender identity for the first time and discovering who they are would read all these articles online saying how essentially they don't exist or how they're wrong or all this stuff, and it's really negative from a very early age. So the only thing that we can really do is just call out the crap whenever we see it. Just call out the right-wing conspiracy theories when we hear about people, and call out the nonsense we hear from essentially from TERFs who say that trans women aren't women and trans men aren't men, because they are. Full stop, end of story.
Excellent. Thank you. No, I appreciate that so much. No, Prashita, did you want to add anything to that at all? Did you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I really hear you on all of that, Nai. Someone who's also I'm also non-binary trans, and kind of like a stat that runs through my head all the time is this one from and this is back in 2018, and I'm pretty sure the state of things for trans people have gotten worse since then, because the mainstream media, especially in the UK, has been running wild with transphobic rhetoric, but also rights are being stripped back, as you said, all over the world. But there was the LGBT in Britain health report in 2018 where half of trans respondents said that they'd thought about taking their own life in the past year, and that is just a disproportionate level of impact on trans people's mental health. But I think what's really important to remember is that trans and non-binary people, or more marginalized communities, aren't struggling with worse mental health statistics because of their identity. It's not because people are trans and non-binary that they're struggling with their mental health. It's because of the discrimination and the hatred from society and the erasure from society that's making them question and sense of self. That's why there's worse mental health in those communities. So I think for me personally, I guess I've been kind of lucky in a way, in that coming out as non-binary has actually been positive for my mental health. I have since felt a lot more comfortable in who I am on the inside, and feel much more just stronger and more validated in who I am, and being able to be free as who I am and not feel the pressure to conform to a heteronormative society around me that I just didn't fit into, or into binary gender categories that I didn't feel comfortable in. And a big part of that has been finding communities of people who do validate that and do feel similarly and who I don't have to like explain myself to and feel seen around. And that's really wonderful. And I think that's why like seeking out community groups and seeking out the people who have similar experiences to you is such an important way to feel comfortable in yourself. But not everyone has access to that. And so, yeah, as you said, Nai, like really all we can do is try and change things in society, because it's not queer people don't have, like trans people don't have bad mental health because of their identity. It's because of the society around us.
Thank you so much, Prashita. That was fantastic. I think you made a very good point, and I think I'll open that question up slightly in a moment. I just want to quickly come to Sancho. I don't know if there was anything particularly you wanted to add on that before I sort of widen that question.
Yeah, I would say, so I'm quite new to using they pronouns, so I'm currently still using she they, so it is something that I have only really recently started to really kind of figure out about myself, in that I don't, you know, fully identify with she her, and to be honest, I have had the like amazing support from a couple of really close friends that I met through my work LGBTQ plus network, and I believe that if I didn't have their support, this whole journey that I'm currently going through would be so much more difficult than it currently is. You know, I've been able to say how I feel in a really open and like honest open and honest conversations, and just kind of you know, play around and just see what works for me. And I definitely think that there's a real power in community and making sure you have that support network, and anything that we can do to support each other in you know, going through those kinds of changes is, you know, really important.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. I was going to open that question up slightly, but I am conscious of time. I see we've got a couple of questions from the audience that I really want to come to, so I appreciate me sat here, you know, for the sake of audience. I'm going to take the top one, which is how important is taking time to yourself in supporting your mental health, and what advice would you give to someone struggling with this? I don't know if anyone on the panel felt that they wanted to take that first. Maybe Adam, would you mind if I came to you on that first, or Klaus, if you wanted to? I'll let you decide. We'll do Adam first, then we'll come to you, Klaus, or Adam.
So yeah, definitely taking. I think taking time for yourself is super important. And I guess it's back to that thing about coping mechanisms and finding what works for you. A big part of how taking time, and it's weaved through a lot of the questions and the topics we've discussed, but taking time for yourself for me has meant taking time perhaps during the working day to get outside, particularly during the winter months, get outside during daylight hours. And actually that's something that, you know, working for the Financial Times, I'm really glad that they are such a supportive organisation in that respect, that actually flexibility and time allows me to take that time out for myself. And I guess if you are in an organisation that maybe you don't have that flexibility, maybe that's part of your role, it would be trying to look at where you can take that time. Is that within your lunch break you are trying to get outside and spend that time? So yes, for me definitely that looks like get outside walking, get outside running, listen to an audiobook. I know that some of the people on the panel have mentioned like investing time into like creative projects, things that are that can work for some people, and I know that there's some of those coping mechanisms and even like pastimes, I guess, that have worked really well for me, that have allowed me to do that. And I guess in terms of how I've done that, I know that being really clear and setting expectations with the people that are around me as to that on a daily basis, this is something that I need to do. And it's not that I am being awkward, it's not that I'm being inflexible. It's part of me making sure that I'm keeping my mental health where it is. So if that does mean get outside, if that does mean taking half an hour to myself to go, out for a walk or to read or to meditate, I think I've been able to set that expectation with the people that are around me, and that's allowed me to take that time for myself. So that's, I guess, how I've approached that, and it feels like it works well, and the people around me have been very supportive
Excellent. No, thank you, Adam. I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing that. Klaus, I appreciate it. You wanted to add something as well. Please be my guest.
Yeah, I mean, obviously building on Adam a little bit, I think self-care for me is really one of the most important things to really keep my mental health in check to some extent. And the one risk I see for myself, at least also when taking care of myself, is simply I'm always picking the things which doesn't include a lot of other people and which really takes me out of society sometimes. So I'm really enjoying going on walks, for example. I enjoy meditating, I enjoy doing yoga, but it's always by myself. So I sometimes really need my husband to push me and really bring me back into real life. But I think, I'm not sure whether that's typical or atypical, but I do think it's value really to step back, take yourself out of things and really spending time just with your thoughts to really get your mental health in check again. But it's equally important really to go back and really go into community and connect. So I think it's both important.
Superb. Did anyone else want to add anything on that? I'm very conscious of time, so I'm not sure. Yeah, Kate, please be my guest.
Yeah, if I can just quickly jump. For me, the self-care, I used to have a perception that self-care was me doing something for myself, and recently it changed to being caring towards myself. So I would say basically the general rule, you are the most important person in your life. If you don't work, if you don't feel well, nothing in your life works. So look at your relationship with yourself, how you treat yourself, and try to develop more caring, compassionate, and loving relationship with yourself. And everything, once you put that as your value, I want to respect myself, I want to feel empowered, I want to take care of myself. Once you have those values, they basically, whatever activity you choose to fulfill that value, it just doesn't matter as long as you've got that end goal of, loving and respecting yourself.
Love it.
Absolutely. Thank you. What a lovely, really heartwarming message to finish up on. That's, oh, I love it. Thank you, Kate. I'm very, very grateful. I am also very conscious of the time, and I want to make sure that everyone's able to get to where they need to be. So I want to say a massive, massive thank you to all of our panelists. It's been so, so great to hear from you all today. This is, so many of the topics are personal topics, but especially, as I kept saying, when there's so much stigma and difficulty around this topic. Thank you all for being able to share your stories and hopefully inspire, if not educate, our audience on them. As said, this is where our panel wraps up for today. This is not the last panel that we're running this month. You can go ahead. We've got a number of events coming up for you in the next couple of months, guys. As you said, we're next Tuesday, we'll be celebrating Ida Hobbit, the International Day Against Queerphobia. So you can come and join us for that. We've got workshops going on, including CV writing coming up and mentoring. So do go and check those out over on our website at mygwork.com. If you're not following us on social media, make sure you are. It's mygwork, nice and straightforward. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope it's been as educational for you as it has been for me.